Hello, my name is Marie and this is Just in Time Worlds. Today I want to discuss Magical Items 101, the creation process. So what I'm going to discuss today is the different models of creating magical items. I'm going to cover magical crafting, magic by place contagion, sympathetic magic, and magic by infusion. And in each case, I will discuss how that impacts your society and your magical system. Okay, let's get cracking. If you do like this kind of content, please do give it a thumbs up. And let's start with magical crafting. Magical crafting is typically used in the European mythos, where magical crafters are people that are much sought after. It's also the typical crafting process in Dungeons and Dragons, where magical items is created by mages. Now, the interesting thing about the magical craftsman process is that it can result in a quest for magical items. So you need to find the craftsperson that can make the item for you. We see this in the Avengers series, where Thor needs to go to the dwarves to get them to make him his new god killer axe. And the whole process of finding the forge and then getting the forge lit again is very typical of that kind of quest for a magic item, where the craftsman needs, 5 pounds of butter and 6 stones from the picked at midnight using a silver sickle to then craft this together into a magical item. The effect of having this kind of magical item system in your world and the effect on your magic system is that if it is common, your magical items will turn into a tradable resource. You will have a situation like the D&D magical market, where people can buy and sell magical items, and craftsmen who do magic will basically just be the same as, say, a woodworker, who crafts cabinets and furniture. If it is a rare skill, like it is in the European mythology, then those craftspeople who can make magical items will be celebrated and sought after. For an example of this from our mythology, the Kalevala from the Finnish mythology has the creation of the sampo as a major element. And there is only one craftsperson who can make the sampo. And Wainamoinen, the first man, has to go in search of him to get him to make it. And when the sampo gets stolen, there's a whole series of events around getting it back. So it's quite interesting if these craftspeople are rare as to who controls them and then who controls their items, because of course those items become artifact level items. So if you're going to use craftspeople to make magical items, it's worth thinking about the level of commonality, and therefore whether those people are just another artisan because magic is common, or whether they are rare and celebrated because their skill is so rare and control over them is such a sought after thing. Magical crafting does also sometimes involve getting specific items from specific places, which leads me into magic by place contagion. So this is typical when you pick up a magical item from a place that is magical. It's often found in shamanistic practices or in stories where you have a magical ore that is being mined. As is the example from Stephen Erickson in the Otatarl mines. So they mine the Otatarl substance, which is an anti-magic substance, that can then be forged into a sword that is an anti-magic sword. If you use this form of magical item creation, so It needs to be a specific item found from a specific place. The result on your culture and your magic is going to be that control of those places is going to be heavily contested. And whoever controls those places will hold a great deal of temporal, real political power. So, and that is also why shamans typically are very secretive about the location of these places when you see it in our world. And of course, if you were to use it in a fantasy world, whoever has control of these places would be very secretive about their location. And if it's not possible to be secretive, they would be very heavily militarized and defended. Because it's power, right? People don't share power easily. But a thing doesn't have to be magical inherently. It can be magical. It doesn't even have to be magical because the mage makes it so. It can be magical because it is sympathetic to another thing. And this is magical item creation by sympathy. It's also sometimes called as below, so above. It's an element of voodoo as well, is of course the voodoo doll, and you do harm to the doll and that takes it up to the person. But it doesn't have to be harm per se. Jim Butcher uses this very effectively in his magic system, where he has, among other things, he has Harry build a comprehensive model of Chicago, and he makes the model magical through sympathetic magic by taking, stones from actual buildings in Chicago to build the model, or pieces of trees from Chicago trees to build the model. And it was a very effective use of sympathetic magic in order to create a magical item. Now, if you have heavy use of sympathetic magic in your world, what will happen is your societies will closely guard their DNA carrying material, because one of the elements of sympathetic magic is that you need an element of the big thing that you're seeking to affect or seeking to spy on. So in the case of voodoo dolls, you need, blood or hair or something like that from the person that you're trying to affect. And that's how you tie the sympathetic link between the items. So, and again, I'm going to talk about Jim Butcher in this context, because in the very first book, he does this so well when the bad guys get hold of some of Harry's DNA, and Harry is terrified by this because he only has a limited period of time until they generate sufficient power to kill him using this DNA. So you can really use that kind of sympathetic magic to add massive tension. If somebody has your DNA in a sympathetic magic system or a place where sympathetic items can be created, you're in real trouble if they mean you harm, because they could strike at you from anywhere if they had sufficient power to do so. So it's worth exploring how sympathetic magic would make people really guard their DNA. Would they have these cleansing rituals to get rid of hair clippings, nail brushes, skin droppings? How much risk do you have every time you bleed? So it's a very interesting element to explore in your magical system and its larger effects on your culture. And then the last form of magic item that I want to talk about is magic by infusion. Okay, so this can either be magic by infusion, where you have something like the genie's lamp in Aladdin. You have a spirit infusing an item, and that provides the power to actually power the item. This is also typical in D&D with the intelligent items. They're typically infused by some sort of spirit. Mercedes Lackey has got an amazing talking sword that is telepathic, that is infused by an ancient spirit. So it's worth thinking about that kind of infusion of a spirit into a magic item. But magical infusion doesn't have to be by a spirit. It could be the mage's own abilities or the person's faith infusing an item. Typically, your warding off a vampire with a cross is based around this principle. So it's not that the person is waving a magical cross at the vampire or a magical whatever item at the vampire. It is that they are infusing that item with their faith. And their faith is using the item as a vehicle for the magic. You also see this quite a lot in shamanistic or in totemistic practices, where an item is sacred to a person because it is sacred to the person. They have infused it with their faith, or their totem has chosen the item. And it is a personal item that works only for them because it is infused with their faith or with their totem specifically. So those are your different kinds of magical items. Let me know if you would like me to explore any one of these in more detail. And I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Please do hit the thumbs up button, and I will see you soon for another episode of Just in Time World.